In case you were foolish enough to think that the 2021 Summer Festival of Football was over, the men and women's football competition at the Tokyo Olympics, along with the 2021 CONCACAF Gold Cup, are here to slap you in the face with yet more footballing drama and entertainment. Football at the Olympics is a slightly controversial concept, though Olympic football does actually precede any other worldwide football tournament, including the FIFA World Cup, by some 30 years. Football was first played at the Olympics in Paris in 1900, and it has featured at every Olympics since, with the exception of the 1932 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles, albeit in a number of different formats and with a number of different rules. From an originally all-amateur, all-male competition, professionalism was allowed in 1984, and a women's competition was introduced in 1996. The Olympics was a major precursor to the World Cup, but once the World Cup was born in 1930, football at the Olympics began to lose some of its appeal, particularly as the gap between the professional and amateur game widened. Great Britain actually dominated the early Olympic era of football, winning gold at 3 out of the first 4 Olympics to feature football, having failed to enter a team for the 1 games that they didn't win. However, Team GB has only entered a men's team for the footballing section of the Olympic Games once since 1960, and that was in 2012 when the United Kingdom hosted the Olympics. There, a Great Britain team featuring the likes of Mika Richards and Ryan Giggs were knocked out in the quarterfinals on penalties by South Korea. And those of you who watched that game will recall that the South Korean penalties were all absolute picture-perfect strikes straight into the top corner, at least as far as I can recall. Well, in today's video, I'm imagining what kind of 11 Team GB, who represent the United Kingdom at the Olympics, would be able to field were they playing football in the men's section of this summer's Olympic Games in Japan. Now, the rules for men's Olympic football selection is that you have a squad of 22 players, including 3 goalkeepers, only 3 of which are allowed to be over the age of 23. This year, due to the Olympics having been postponed for 12 months, that has been raised to 3 players over the age of 24. Or, to be more specific, only 3 players can be included in each squad who were born before January 1st, 1997. So those are the parameters that I was operating under when I made my selections, and I also decided to include a minimum of 1 player from each of the 4 nations that make up the United Kingdom. That is, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Ignore the fact that even if there were a Team GB men's football team, they probably couldn't qualify for the Olympics due to all playing as separate teams within the international game, and that they wouldn't have even qualified if they did, since none of them reached the semi-finals of the Under-21 Euros, and also ignore the fact that most top European teams refused to release players for the Olympics due to its close proximity to the start of the season. You know, it's more of a fun thought exercise, so humour me. Mammoth introduction, even by my standards, done and dusted. Here is my stab at what a Team GB football team might have looked like at the Tokyo Olympics, ignoring all of the real-life caveats that I just mentioned and just picking the best possible team. Goalkeeper: Dean Henderson. It's a no-brainer in goal, at least as far as I can tell, with Aaron Ramsdale surely no match for Dean Henderson when it comes to securing a starting berth. Born in March 1997, Henderson meets the necessary age requirements, and he is already knocking on the door when it comes to England selection. Henderson has only actually won 1 senior cap to date, due to Jordan Pickford routinely reserving some of his finest performances for the international stage, and almost never letting Gareth Southgate down. Henderson has also had to bide his time at club level, despite a couple of outstanding seasons on loan at Sheffield United, now battling it out with Spanish international David De Gea at Old Trafford. Recent reports suggest that Henderson may have usurped De Gea as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's number 1 in the Premier League next season, and if that is the case, given Henderson's age and De Gea's eye-watering wages, that would be quite the achievement. A really safe pair of hands, particularly for his age, he starts in goal, and it was never really in doubt. Right back: Trent Alexander-Arnold. England's plethora of outstanding right-backs are mostly very young, which means that selecting an 11 in which all but 3 players have to have been born in 1997 or later only really rules out Kyle Walker and Kieran Trippier for the right-back position. The alternatives to Alexander-Arnold, who I'll come to later on, all bring different toolkits and skill sets to a team. But I do think that Alexander-Arnold is a really rare and outstanding talent. Ever since breaking through at Liverpool, it has been clear that Trent has something a bit special about him, particularly in terms of his technique when he strikes the ball and his mouth-watering deliveries into the box. Given the centre-forwards at my disposal, I think Alexander-Arnold is the right choice at right back, though I wouldn't complain about having to start any of about 4 different alternatives. Centre-back, Fikayo Tomori. I was talking to my dad about Fikayo Tomori in the car on the way to the Euro 2020 final because he had seen that AC Milan had paid £25 million to sign the centre-back from Chelsea, and he thought that was outrageous. Tomori spent a season on loan at Hull City 3 or 4 years ago, and my dad clearly hadn't been overly impressed by him. It's worth noting that Tomori was still a teenager at the time and has come on a long way since then, and was already, well, I thought at least, showing the makings of a well-rounded defender. Capable of filling in at right back or centre back, Tomori can still play in either of those 2 positions. But it is at centre back that Tomori impressed on loan at the San Siro last season, convincing the Rossoneri to fork out a hefty fee for him. Were it not for injuries, I'm next to certain that Joe Gomez would have started ahead of Tomori within this 11. But off the back of the last 18 to 24 months, I think Tomori richly deserves to get the nod between the 2. Centre-back, Jonny Evans. Our first overage player. Yes, I know some of you will point to the likes of Harry Maguire and John Stones, and yes, I do believe they are both superior centre-backs in 2021 than Jonny Evans. But a Team GB surely has to reflect Great Britain and Northern Ireland in its fullest, for diplomatic reasons, if nothing else. Evans most assuredly does not just make this 11 due to tokenism though. I do genuinely believe that he is a very good centre-back, and he is more experienced than either Maguire or Stones. Alex Ferguson was said to be furious when Manchester United chose to sell Evans to West Bromwich Albion after the wily old Scot had retired, and the test of time has proved him right. During 6 seasons in which the Manchester United defence has been chopped, changed, and sometimes looked all at sea, Evans has been a bastion of consistency for both West Brom and now with Leicester City. Aged 33 and capped 91 times by Northern Ireland, Evans would bring leadership and experience to this very young team, and I think I'd actually appoint him as captain. Left back, Kieran Tierney. I knew it would be tight when I googled Kieran Tierney's age of birth to see whether or not he was eligible, and as soon as I saw those 4 hallowed digits reading 1997, I knew that he had to start. Adding yet another one of the home nations to our 11, a term which isn't always universally appreciated, I think Tierney is superb. His start to life at Arsenal was disrupted by injuries, preventing him from really getting going at the Emirates, but anyone who'd seen much of Tierney at Celtic knew that he was not just a very talented footballer, but also an outstanding character. His mental strength and work rate are both first class, and he has proven that now with the Gunners. In fact, I think he's so good that if Arsenal don't get back into Europe in the imminent future, they could well lose him in the not too distant future. So Tierney completes our back 4, which I think looks really solid with a bit of everything. Defensive midfield, Declan Rice. Who else but Declan Rice to get us started in midfield? I liked Rice a lot when I first saw him in action for West Ham's under-18s, playing as a centre-back, where he looked really cool, calm and composed, both in and out of possession. It was little surprise to see him transition so successfully into midfield then, where Rice still loves to defend, but is capable of stepping out from his deep starting position, beating a man and picking a pass. I actually think we can expect to see more of that from Rice over the next couple of years, provided that he is well coached and looks to add it to his game. And, as I have said for some time, there really is no reason why he shouldn't go on and win at least 100 caps for England. I love Rice's reading of the game and anticipation for someone so young, and you really do have to stop and remember that he is only 22 years old from time to time. An absolute must in midfield for England for many years to come, and I think the same would be true for my Team GB11. Central midfield, Aaron Ramsey. Still sitting quite deep, but playing in slightly more of a box-to-box role than Rice, I must admit that I haven't seen Aaron Ramsey play week in, week out since he signed for Juventus, but on the occasions in which I have watched him, in either Serie A or the Champions League, he looks to have fit in really well. That shouldn't come as any great surprise, of course. Ramsey looked to be a star in the making from the age of 17, and only a truly horrific injury held him back from becoming a top-class midfielder at a very early age. He bounced back from that setback in style at Arsenal, and though I'll never forgive him for scoring the goal that ended Hull City's dreams in the 2014 FA Cup final, I cannot deny that he is a fantastic addition to this 11. Ramsey comes in as our first Welshman and our second overage player, joining Jonny Evans. Once again, Ramsey is vastly experienced, at 30 years of age, and capped some 67 times. And I think he would provide real balance between attack and defence to our midfield. Right wing, Jadon Sancho. Whilst I would trust Gareth Southgate with my life as an England fan, and thought Bukayo Saka was brilliant at the Euros, I made no secret of the fact that I think Jadon Sancho is too good to be sat on the bench. A sensational talent whose skill on the ball and attacking output is among the finest in Europe, Sancho looks set to be given the opportunity to prove anyone who still doubts his talents at the highest level wrong at Manchester United next season. I don't know whether he'll hit the ground running or need a bit of time to readjust to life at a new club, but I've few doubts about the fact that he will prove to be a big success in time. Given that I'd start him for the England senior team, and he was born in the year 2000, and I think he's one of the best right wingers on the planet, subscribers won't be overly surprised to see him start in this 11, despite some really notable competition. Attacking midfield, Phil Foden. A former teammate of Jadon Sancho's at Manchester City and in the England youth teams, and now of course in the England senior team, I remember one of my earliest videos back in 2017, so 4 years ago now, in which I talked about some of England's best youth team players. And I think I put Foden first and Sancho second. Or maybe the other way around, but I'm 99% certain that they were the top two. Whilst Sancho seemed to be the more gifted of the two at that time, I always felt Foden would be the most important to England, given our historic inability to produce midfielders who are desperate to get on the ball at all times, run at defenders, and take risks. Foden did all of those things as a 16 and 17-year-old, and he still does them now, aged 21. Whilst Sancho chose to move away from Manchester City in an attempt to get more first-team opportunities, Foden stuck it out, and both players have been vindicated in their decisions. I think Foden will one day be England's outstanding player if he keeps working hard and avoids any shattering injury setbacks. And he starts ahead of one very notable absentee that I will come to in just a moment. Left wing, Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford is an interesting footballer and a fascinating character, who has become immensely popular for his actions off the pitch among the vast majority of the great British public, but still divides opinion in terms of his talents on it. Personally, I'm a big fan, and whilst I don't think he is necessarily as technically gifted as Jadon Sancho or Phil Foden, I still think he's destined for a wonderful career. That's because of his attitude more than anything else, which I think determines the fact that he will keep on improving and fight tooth and nail for a starting berth at both club and international level. Quick, confident, and clever in his movement when he's got the right service, Rashford has scored 20 plus goals in each of the last 2 seasons in all competitions. But you might not know that if you listen solely to his critics. With Sancho and Foden to his right, Rashford would be the one in this team that really stretched the opposition, getting in behind, and creating gaps to exploit for those around him. He was born in October 1997, so he doesn't add to our overage criteria, despite the fact that he is very experienced already. Centre forward, Harry Kane. If you were counting those overage players, then you would have known that we were up to 2, which could only mean one thing for the final selection within my starting 11. We still have the substitutes, / rest of the 22-man squad still to come, effectively providing a backup option in each position. But completing our starting 11 is, I believe, the finest footballer from Great Britain and Northern Ireland at this moment in time. Harry Kane might not be the quickest, and he doesn't have a great deal of flair or fancy tricks up his sleeve. But aside from that, he comes very close to being a complete centre forward. Absolutely lethal within the 6-yard box, Kane's heading accuracy and his first time finishing are both outstanding, but he's also capable of scoring goals from range. Increasingly, we now see him coming deep at times as well, picking up the ball and either distributing it out to the flanks, giving a little give and go, or, if he's given the opportunity, turning on the ball and committing defenders. He's brilliant at finding spaces within the box, winning free kicks, and both scoring and creating goals. All things considered, I think he improves our 11 and our squad more than any other overage player, so he had to be included. Moving on to our outstanding set of backup options, Dean Henderson is joined by Aaron Ramsdale and Freddie Woodman between the sticks. I think it would be fair to say that is the weakest depth within this squad, though that is hardly surprising given they are so young and goalkeepers tend to develop and peak a little later than outfield players. Ramsdale, for all his critics, I actually think will become a Premier League goalkeeper again before long, whether that's with Sheffield United or somewhere else. And on the day that I'm recording this video, he has started to be linked with Arsenal. I have gone full Gareth Southgate with his initial Euro 2020 squad with my 4 defenders, who serve as Alexander-Arnold, Tomori, Evans and Tierney's backups, since 3 of the 4 can, and often do, play as right-backs. Reece James, I have no doubt some would start ahead of Alexander-Arnold, and he probably serves as the Liverpool star's primary deputy in his preferred position. Aaron Wan-Bissaka also obviously plays primarily as a right-back for Manchester United, though there are 1 or 2 whispers that the club may look to retrain him to play at centre-back. That would require an awful lot of work, though I do think he is capable of it, so he could double up there or on the right of a back 3 within this squad. Last but not least, in terms of the right-backs, is James Justin, who actually is very much a 2-position footballer, who played twice as many games at left-back as he did at right-back at Leicester City last season. So he would be my official backup to Kieran Tierney. The last defender, and the only other true centre-back in the squad, is Joe Gomez, who I mentioned earlier on and is arguably unfortunate not to start. I have selected just 2 further midfield players to cover effectively 3 different roles, given that Rice, Ramsey and Foden would play almost as a 6, an 8 and then as a 10 within our starting 11. The man who gives me the freedom to do that, and who I think certainly is bitterly unfortunate not to start, is Mason Mount. A compelling case could be made to start Mount ahead of either Ramsey or Foden within our starting lineup, but I wanted all 4 of the nations that make up the United Kingdom to be represented within the starting 11, and I do think Ramsey is very good. Meanwhile, Foden, I think, is just a pretty special player who I couldn't leave out. Mount seems too good not to start, but I couldn't quite square that quandary, so one of them just had to miss out. Next up, I initially thought I could pick Scott McTominay as Declan Rice's deputy in that midfield holding role, but he was born just 1 month too early to be considered. I could instead opt for a second Welsh international in the form of Ethan Ampadu, but for all of his talent, I don't think that he has quite done enough to merit that just yet. In the end, I went for Hamza Chowdhury, another combative midfield sitter who just loves to defend. He faces a tough battle to start games up against Wilfried Zaha at Leicester City, but there is definitely a player in there, and having been born in October 1997, well, he fits the bill. In the forward areas, covering, well, all 4 roles to a certain extent, but certainly at least 3, I've gone for Bukayo Saka, Mason Greenwood, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Saka is an absolute dream to have as part of any squad, given his fantastic personality that rubs off on the rest of the players, his tremendous versatility, and of course, the fact that he is very good at football. Greenwood can play on either flank, particularly the right though, and through the middle, and is more than capable of really bursting through and enjoying a 25-plus goal season within the next couple of years, I think at least, and we ought not forget that he is still only 19. Dominic Calvert-Lewin is another man who may be younger than some people would think, since he left Sheffield United to join Everton so young, and seemed to be in and around the first team for so long before really earning his stripes as a regular starter. Transformed under Carlo Ancelotti, though perhaps primarily thanks to Duncan Ferguson, I don't think there are many centre-forwards in Europe who are better at winning and directing headers than Calvert-Lewin. His movement has come on leaps and bounds over the last 18 months, and you would bank on him bagging 15 plus Premier League goals once again next season. He would start if I hadn't included an overage player at centre forward who just so happens to be the best player in the entire team. So that is it for today's video. Silly and entirely hypothetical, but hopefully somewhat interesting and thought-provoking. I've no doubt there are one or two players you chop and change, if not more, so let us know which down below in the comments. Thank you all as ever for watching. Like this video if you enjoyed it, or just, want to be kind, because apparently that helps with the algorithm. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram, or both, via the username at HITC Sevens on both, and make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on by hitting the little notifications bell for HITC Sevens.